This is
Good
I don't know if your
morning.
mic's on. But you can.
Good morning.
we're gonna go ahead. This is Margaret Williams.
Yes.
But I just make a quick announcement to those who are in attendance, really quick, and then we'll just go ahead and start talking to you in a little bit. So first of all, I just want to thank all of those who are present here for our event. So Ms. Margaret Williams. I also want to thank our other guest, Mr. Mike Williams,
You got
student here at the university. He's also a student athlete, baseball player. He's a first year graduate student.
Yes, ma'am.
And NBA.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't hear what you're saying. Oh, that's what I thought.
Oh. Can you hear me now, Miss Williams?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So, again, thank you. We're going to go ahead and get started, but if you have not checked in, please check in right outside the front door. You have to because of the staff room and COVID. It's okay.
Here.
And then go ahead and just get your lunch. Thanks to athletics for sponsoring the food today. I want to acknowledge our athletic director, Mr. John Plumel. I hope I said your last name wrong. I've always wondered if I said that correctly. So thank you very much for sponsoring this event and supporting us. I also want to thank our IT person because this was a massive setup. So thank you very, very, very much. And to all of our guest attendees, thank you for joining us today. So with that being said, I'm going to let Mike introduce his grandmother, and then we'll get started with the questions. So Mike.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. And today I'm here with my grandmother, Miss Margaret Williams. She's coming to us live from Birmingham, Alabama. And without further ado, I guess let's get into the questions. Grandma, can you hear me fine?
Yes, I'm hearing you right now.
All right, here we go. Okay, well, the first question that I have for you, Granny, is what inspired you to join the fight for civil rights?
Well, it was a lot of things that inspired me. There was so much other stuff going on, so we decided we need to do something different.
100%. What specific things that were going on in Birmingham at that time did you see that affected your family that made you want to get involved?
Well, directly, not directly my family, but the whole Birmingham. We had a lot of different things going on, as in the cafeteria. We had black and white, and all other buildings we had black and white. So we decided it needed to be different. And Reverend Shuttlesworth, he was the one that organized it with some of the other ministers here in Birmingham.
Okay. Okay. Well, continue. Go ahead. Continue, Granny.
Mm-hmm. So after all this was going on, they decided that they wanted to organize, and they did. And they named the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, and they organized the church. And they had ministers here in Birmingham who went along with them during the time when they were organizing. And we would meet at different churches every Monday night. And Reverend Gardner, he was the spokesman for every Monday night. And we just, from there, they organized, we had a choir, we had other people who participated, and we would meet every Monday night. And from then, it went that we were going to have a movement. We would call the Human Rights Movement. And then they decided that some of us would have to go to jail because going into these places, we would be arrested because they wanted to go along with the old thing that they had been doing. So we decided to meet every Monday night, and every Dr. King would come in to visit on Monday nights, and then Reverend Shuttlesworth's home had been bombed twice,
Wow.
and we had a lawyer, Lawyer Shores. His home had been bombed, and
Wow.
then at the meetings we would have security to watch at night because the Ku Klux Klan was riding, and they were trying to see what they were going to do during the meetings. So it was just from one thing to the other.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, you said that it was organized by the church. So can
Hmm.
you give us some insight as to how you ended up being selected or volunteered through your church, and how they selected people to join?
Well, you wasn't a volunteer; you just attend the movement. Everybody who wanted to be a part of it, they would go on Monday night to the meetings, and
Hmm.
that's what we were done going to the meetings. And they would say, if you wanted to go to jail, they didn't compel you to go to jail, but they would ask you if you were willing to go to jail if you was arrested. And I was one of the ones who volunteered to go, and I wound up going. I went to jail with Reverend Shuttlesworth, and they threw us in the paddy wagon off to jail. We went, and I spent the day in jail, and nobody in my family knew I was going. Because some people was against the movement, and I didn't tell them that I was going to jail because I thought maybe they wouldn't want me to go to jail, so I wouldn't tell them. I would just went.
Wow. How did it feel to be in jail and know that I guess something positive would end up, come of it. But at the time, it must have been tough, spending a day in jail. It's definitely a place you wouldn't want to be. How did that feel, Granny?
Well, no, you wouldn't want to be, but I didn't have such a hard time being in there because I mean, when it's time to eat, I refused my tray, and the police was walking side of us. And if you didn't get your tray, he'd tell you to get it anyway. He'd say, I don't want to eat. Well, eat anyway. And it's compelling things that they would tell you to do there in jail. So it wasn't such a bad uh, visit, I think.
Uh,
But some of the real prisoners in there, when time to eat, they had, I won't forget that, they had pork and beans and Winnie's. And the lady across from me, she said, you don't want that? I said, no. So she said, well, give it to me. And so I passed it along to her. So, so after I spent the day in jail, for a day, I was ready to go home.
I believe that.
So, Miss Williams, what do you think about the modern day civil rights movement, specifically Black Lives Matter? What is your view on this particular moment?
Well, Black Lives Matter, but I don't think it's really going over like it should with some of the policemen because they seem to be kind of a rude against Black Lives Matter. So I don't know whether it's really going to work or not.
Wow. And what was it like for you to see the first Black president elected during your time? Been fighting for rights for a long time, and I think a lot of us thought that we would never see that in our lifetime, but it did happen. So take us back to that moment when when Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. What were your feelings at that time?
Oh, that's true. Because when he was elected, that was a wonderful thing because it was more people voting going to the polls than any I had recognized or seen before. So everybody was really enthused over him becoming to be the president.
And now that we just elected the first woman who's Black, South Asian, as the Vice President of the United States, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's a good thing. I think it's really a good thing. It's a journey, so I think we're on our way.
Oh, well, I was gonna ask you, Granny, to share the experience that you possibly could have gave to my dad and his brother and sister when they had the opportunity to meet Dr. King, and their reaction to that was kind of fearful from what you told me before. Can you explain that situation?
Well, they were young and they didn't really understand, but I think now they understand very well. At that time, they didn't. They didn't really understand what was really going on and what we're trying to prove. Because going to the lunch counter, you had black and white. You had the restaurants, the bathrooms, everything was black and white. So that change has been made. So that was a big encouragement to them to see that a lot of things that was going on need to be changed, but they didn't understand that they need to be a part of it at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, are you still in the fight, Ms. Williams?
What do you say?
Are you still in the fight? Do you still participate in some step?
Well, indirectly, I'm participating because I'm up in age now. So I'm not as active as I was at that time. But at that time, I was really active. And, we had Dr. King there were a lot of ministers here in Birmingham. There was Dr. King, and he would come to town, but the ones in Birmingham, N.A. Smith and Reverend Porter, the Woods brothers, all of them were very dedicated to the movement. And so we really had a movement going at that time.
And what was the role of women during that time in the civil rights movement? How important?
Well, after it was organized, they had everything in the church. They just organized a whole program, a movement called the Civil Rights Institute. And they organized, they had a choir there, they had security, they had it's everything that a person would have, in a church. And they had visitors coming in from out of town to speak. And on Easter Sunday, some of the ministers got together and marched to the jail. That was Reverend Porter, Dr. King, and N.A. Smith. Well, when they went to jail, Dr. King, he didn't let them get him out of jail. He stayed in jail, and that's when he wrote that letter from the Birmingham jail. You may have heard of the letter he wrote from the Birmingham jail.
Yes. Wow. So, Mike, there was a question in the chat about anything that your granny, as you call her, is there anything that has surprised you when she talks about those times? What are your feelings about all of this? What was it like growing up, hearing these stories? Because time looks different now compared to back then.
Well, it's definitely cool to see my grandmother go into more detail. Growing up, we always heard the stories from my dad and my uncles and aunts about how she was involved. But I don't think until recently I knew that she was involved to this level of magnitude. We knew she went to jail, we knew she marched with Martin Luther King, but we didn't know that she was in that close contact with her, or with him on Mondays, week after week as he was organizing movements. And I think about Margaret, I'm just proud. She's history. She's living history. I love you, Granny. I love the insight you're giving. You're helping a lot. You're still promoting change today with this interview and the conversations, and your legacy will live on. So, yeah, it's definitely cool to be a part of this.
So, Mrs. Williams,
Mhm.
I've had conversations with young individuals who didn't vote and don't think it matters. What would you say to some of the young individuals, even in this room or in our communities, that don't believe voting changes anything? What would you say to that?
Well, I don't think it's many now that believe it's not important. Because this last voting, we had more people voting than we ever had. So I don't really think they think that way. They think it's very important to vote.
Yeah, good question. Granny,
Yes.
how have you seen Birmingham change since the days of the human rights and civil rights movement? Have you seen positive change in the areas of race relations and the areas of reform to policies?
Oh yes, we had changes. A lot of changes made since back in '63. Most of all this was going down around '63. And a lot of changes have been made since then. A lot of people had to go to jail to do it, but it changed.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so I really think it made a lot of change because when Martin went to jail, a lot of the white people they said that he was an outsider. He didn't need to be in Birmingham.
Mhm.
So Shutters would have invited him to come to Birmingham, but they thought that he was an insider and he didn't need to be in Birmingham. What he said was, "It's injustice in one place, it's injustice everywhere," and so he continued coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
With your service, you shared on a call with my dad and my uncle Anthony and myself that you didn't even know that you had been honored by the Civil Rights Institute as a foot soldier during the movement. You received a call from a friend that informed you. Can you describe to us how that felt to find out that you had been honored by the Civil Rights Institute there in Birmingham for your service during the movement?
Yes, because the civil rights was born out of the movement. That's when it began. And so after all the foot soldiers, they made a recording of it. And now it's in the Civil Rights Institute. And one of my friends who worked there, she was calling me saying, Miss Margaret, I didn't know you was a foot soldier. She said, I see it here. She does volunteer work at the Civil Rights Institute, and she was saying that she saw my name there, and she called me. I said, yeah, I was a foot soldier. She said, well, I didn't know that.
Woman, I really.
So, yeah, it has made a lot of difference. And, with like being a foot soldier, there were lots of more. And then the children, we had disc jockey, Tall Ball, that was his name, and what's the other one? Charlie Stewart. They
Mhm.
were they would get the children out of school, and there was so many children going to jail. They had to put them over in the fairground because they
Wow.
couldn't put them all in jail.
Wow.
They would leave school and demonstrate. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, when Martin started coming, he had friends to come with him, and they really knew how to get those children out of school to demonstrate. So it was a lot of that going on.
So, Miss Williams,
Hmm.
you participated in many, many marches during your time.
Oh yeah.
Um, can you share a time where you were really, really concerned for your life, for your family? Is there one incident that stands out to you during that time?
Oh yes. They when they down there at 16th Street Church. That's right across from the Civil Rights Institute. There were a lot of demonstrators that day, and uh, the firemen came, and they turned that hose on Shuttlesworth, and he had to really go to the hospital because they turned their water on him full force, and he had to go to the hospital. So that was kind of a scary moment there.
Did that ever happen to you?
Oh no, it didn't happen to me. I was just one looking on.
What was Dr. Martin Luther King like as a person?
Very nice person. He was very nice. And when he come to town, he was just like one of us. Wasn't any different in him. He was really a nice person. I enjoyed meeting him.
And what
I tried to get my children to go and meet him, but they didn't want to meet him, so that they didn't ever meet him.
and why didn't they want to meet him? Was it, just kids thinking that it wasn't a big deal, or were they scared because of all the things they saw? What was their reason?
Afraid. They was afraid to go because all the demonstrations, they were being arrested when different ones going to jail and all of that. So they were just really afraid. So I didn't, try to force them if they didn't want to go, but I really wanted them to go to meet Martin.
Well, kind of segueing off that question, Granny, what was it like to raise young children during that time?
Well, I raised mine, try to raise mine the right way at that time. And other children that I come in contact with, I would try to tell them the right thing to do. So, yeah, I tried my best to do the right thing for other children, not only mine, other children too.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
So, Mrs. Williams, it's just amazing to sit here and talk. I consider you a living legend, to share your experiences of during a very violent time in U.S. history. So when you think about the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, take us back to that moment. What was going through your mind at that time?
Oh, I was really hurt because I happened to be standing on my front porch talking to one of my neighbors when the news come through that he had been assassinated. And we were all hurt because we enjoyed him coming in and out of Birmingham on different occasions that we would have at the church. So it was really a bad time to hear that.
Wow. And raising your children during that time where it was still segregated for the most part, what was it like for them? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about them being scared, but what was it like for them as far as, I mean, they lived during a period where there was segregation and now desegregation, going to school. Did they go to mostly all Black schools during their time, or was there a period of time where they went from segregated schools to desegregated schools? And if so, how did they deal with that?
Mhm. Well, they went to just regular school, but as the time went on, the school got to be integrated, and some of them have to. My baby boy, he wound up going to integrated school, and my grandson went to great integrated school, but they went to all Black.
And what was your youngest son's experience once he went to an integrated school? Did he face
Well,
any violence or trouble, or, I mean? What was his experience like?
Well, no, I don't think he experienced anything out of order because he wound up going there and he left there and went to Northwestern in Chicago to college and there he's in California now working. So he made it fine with that. Because we always visit different occasions when he was in college there in Chicago. We went to Northwestern, that's right.
Did you have an opportunity to meet civil rights activist John Lewis? And if so, what was that like?
John Willis.
Lewis?
Oh, John Lewis. Oh, yeah. He was visiting Birmingham. He was a nice guy. Yeah. He was visiting Birmingham also. A lot of civil rights people visiting Birmingham because of Shuttlesworth would invite a lot of them to Birmingham because they bombed his church and his house.
Wow.
They were throwing bombs all around at one time because they on College Hill, it was really College Hill, but they started calling it Bombers Hill because they were putting so many bombs up there.
So at this moment, we're kind of at the halfway point. I know there's some questions in the chat. So Michael Latore, if you can help me navigate that as far as what questions are in the chat. But in the meantime, are there any questions from the audience that you would like to ask Mrs. Williams? If so, raise your hand. Any thoughts?
Granny, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
We have a question. The girl in the audience wanted to know, was the bombings in direct opposition to the movement that y'all were bringing forth?
Yes. They're angry mobs. They were Ku Klux Klan.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
they were angry, and that's what they were showing their anger there by throwing bombs and things around.
Any other questions? This one's in that.
Hold on, Granny. There's a question coming.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, just with all that going on, my question would be, where do you find the strength and what kept you going? Because I can imagine that was extremely scary in many situations. So, you know,
Did you hear?
Oh, the church kept us going. That's the being in the church and member of the church. That kept us going.
So
See, where the 4 girls was bombed there, that's across from the Civil Rights Institute. And that's where they bombed the 16th Street Church, where the 4 girls was killed. That's right across from the Civil Rights Institute. And otherwise, the institute was born out of the movement.
I have a quick question. Being in Birmingham, were there any white citizens that participated in the movement and marched with you? Any white voices that were part of it or attended your meetings? Or was it all African Americans?
No, there was some white. There was some few white would participate. Some white would come. But there were those who didn't participate. But there was some white there.
any other questions from the audience?
I have a question for you, Granny. Being that your four of your kids graduated from Alabama State, and one of them graduated from Northwestern, and all graduated college and are successful and doing well in life afterwards. How proud of you are you of that, that you raised children that are very um, that have done well, especially coming from the environment and the childhood and the different hardships they had to go through.
I'm very proud. I'm very proud that they were able to accept what we were trying to do for them. That's wonderful.
I know you made a lot of sacrifices, you and Granddad. Can you, explain maybe some of the sacrifices that you and Granddad had to make in order to provide those opportunities for your children?
Well, we worked, and then Charlie, my husband, he wound up working 2 jobs to try to make end meet. So we just worked, and was glad that they were able to go to college.
I have a question for you, Miss Williams. There was actually a question from the chat. How did you feel when you saw the insurrection at the Capitol? What was your thoughts on that?
Oh, I didn't like that. That's terrible. That's just not right. I don't like that. And I think that's just terrible for anybody who would send a person down there to do such evil. That's evil. And not, I just think it's really evil for that to happen.
Did you feel in seeing that we were going back, that set us back as a country?
Well, I don't think it should be going back. I don't think one person should be responsible for the world being turned around. I just think they need to do more by policing some of these people who are doing all this evil stuff. I don't think we should be going back for one person's deeds, which really wasn't called for. So I just don't think that's would be necessary to be going back. Try to keep going forward.
And with that, what advice or tips you would give to, especially our youth today, our college students, as far as getting involved? What lesson learned that you learned during your time of fighting the civil rights movement? What advice could you give to those coming up?
Well, if you're going to try to make things better, you're going to do it in the right way. You're not going to be out there doing other things. You can't make anything right if you're going to do other things. Because if you try to make it right, you do right. That's the way I go.
I'm just enjoying it.
Any other questions from the audience? It could be anything.
This is Shardina Owens. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Dr. Owens.
Yeah, being over 70, I remember these things. And one of the things I remember is really a galvanization of students to support the movement. Students going into areas and fighting for voter registration and really trying to make a change. What advice do you have for current students in terms of being involved with racial advancement?
Well, I think they should get involved. And when they get involved, encourage others to do the same thing. And that way it will work. But if you're not doing the right thing, you can't encourage anybody to do anything.
Any other questions?
Angela, this is Amy Aldridge Stanford. Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
I first of all, I just want to thank you and Mike for doing such a great job in this conversation, Miss Williams. But Miss Williams, I just want you to know what an honor it is for us to have you joining us today. And we hope that you can do it maybe in person sometime as well in the future. I've just learned so much from listening to you, and I'm very touched by watching how you and Mike interact with each other. I think it's just beautiful. I can tell he just respects you so much. I'm wondering if you've always stayed in Birmingham, and we know that a lot of Black folks, moved up north after the Civil Rights Movement and during the Civil Rights Movement. I'm wondering if you ever thought about leaving Birmingham when you were younger with your family, and if not, what made you stay?
No, not at all. I guess I love Birmingham. So I had no desire to leave. I visited away from with my sister in Detroit and around, but I always wanted to come back to Birmingham. So I've never wanted to go and live anywhere else.
Are there any other questions from those who are joining us via WebEx? Any questions from the audience?
Yeah. Put the mics back there.
Got a question coming, Granny. Hold on.
Mhm.
Hello. So, with police brutality during the movement, were there any police that supported the movement and helped?
Yes, the police will come. We have some police protection, and the firemen, different firemen, they will come to keep the crowd down, and some of the police would patrol on the outside. But the movement had their own people to patrol on the outside because of different activities going on the outside, and they would have their own people out there to guard while the movement was going on, the meeting was going on. Yeah. Then the firemen would come because the crowd would be so big, and they'd be concerned about overcrowded churches because a lot of people would be in attendance.
So, Mrs. Williams, I've been learning about really unknown, unsung heroes. And one person that I learned more about is Miss Ella Baker, who they consider as the mother of the civil rights movement. Did you have any encounter with her at all?
No, but I've heard of her. I didn't have any encounter with her, but I've heard of her.
And what do you think about, there's been discussions for decades about our textbooks in high schools and middle schools, basically not really expanding on the history contributions that Blacks made in this country. So what are your thoughts about education and how we talk about sometimes these difficult conversations, especially when we're talking about race? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm all for education. That's been my thing all the time. Education has always been in my mind to promote. So I think it's a good thing.
And go ahead. Was she gonna say something? I'm not
I
sure.
was just thinking.
Okay.
That's good.
I want to ask, so during this time, you're participating in the movement. Was your husband right alongside with you? And how, if not, how, I mean, how did y'all work that out as far as you being out there marching? I mean, how did that work as far as your relationship?
Well, it worked fine because he felt like the children. He didn't want to, he didn't want to, he go to the movement. And then a lot of times he was working, he didn't get off early anyway. But he didn't hardly go to the movement that much. No, he didn't.
Oh, go ahead, Granny. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to say he didn't go to the movement that much.
I know as a, as he was, we said he was working two jobs at certain times. Did he feel a responsibility that he didn't want to get in trouble because of the movement and jeopardize maybe providing for the family?
Well, no, then he didn't think providing for the family would have a problem with it. He just didn't want to come in contact with others that he might have been violent. And that was his thing about it. Mhm. He said a lot of whites, didn't agree with what we were doing. And there were a lot of different things going on that he just didn't approve of. So rather than get a part of it, he just didn't participate that much.
Granny, could you tell us maybe about interactions or if you ever saw Bull Connor up close and personal? He was,
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Bull Connor would be out, and then he would ride. He would ride in a car that he'd be hid in the car, some kind of tank or something. That they would ride him around in to see what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah, Bull Connor, that was his name.
When you saw Bull Connor, who was he was kind of like the main provocatory person of the opposition. When you saw him out, was there kind of a realization that it was going to be a more serious kind of day, or there could be some punishment for potential for what for the protest y'all were doing that day? Whenever you would see him out there.
Yeah, well, yes, but he mostly wouldn't walk. He'd be in the tank. They ride in the tank to see what was going on.
Wow.
How to walk around. He was just riding in that tank to see what was going on.
Well, we have a little bit more time. One more, there's a question.
Thank you for giving this opportunity to hear these insights. Mrs. Williams, given your experience, what ideas or advice do you have for this generation of movements and movements in the future?
Well, in this generation, I just think that they should stay in school and learn as much as they can and stay out of trouble. And those are the real problems that we have to do with. So if they do that, they will be okay.
Any other questions? And I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. So I think this ends our program. So Mrs. Williams, I want to thank you for taking out your sweet time to share your experiences with us. You've given us insights that we probably would not have had. I also want to thank, here, hold on. Oh, wow. So there must be some technical.
So I think they can still probably hear us. So.
But I also want to thank Mr. Anthony Williams. He's there kind of making sure that we got connected. And he's been helpful to her. It's ensuring that technology-wise, everything is working properly for this event to happen. And to each of you to come here and share this moment, thank you so much. There are other Black History Month programs going throughout the rest of this month. One event that we are planning towards the end of this month is the role of the church in race relations. So we have 2 local pastors who are going to be talking about the role of the church as it relates to race relations, history and current, I guess you can say, concerns that we're dealing with. And so we encourage you to participate. That will be virtual event. Actually, we originally had it for the first, but we had to change it because of COVID. So we are changing it to the last week in February. Check iEngage. We are currently updating that once we make confirmations. And so that is it. Thank you so much for showing up.
Thank y'all for coming. This has been a cool experience for myself and my family. I'm 23. My grandmother's 88. So, you know, she never really went into much detail when I was younger about certain experiences. So being able to, you know, interview her and, you know, really get a lot of information that I didn't even know has been a really cool experience. And I thank y'all for being a part of it and coming out and supporting. So, and I know she does too, even though the camera's not there. She was definitely excited to do this and, you know, be able to give back some of her knowledge and experiences. So we really appreciate it and thank y'all very much.
And again, thank you to athletics for supporting this event and sponsoring the food. So I really appreciate that. And with that being said, I will go to the back. And I think we have enough t-shirts for everyone here. And so thank you. And thank you to the IT person back in the room and to the photographer for showing up today.
Thank you.
Thank you, all the guests of WebEx too.
Wow.